Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Periodically, we like to convene some insiders, as we call that, and those are regular panelists that have been on our program over the years, but also our leaders in their communities that have some knowledge that maybe doesn't always float to the top. We will hopefully divine that knowledge with our panel of insiders. We start in a moment, and we hope you stay with us. We begin right now.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Christopher Chung from the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, Carl Blackstone from the Columbia Chamber of Commerce, and Donald Thompson from the Diversity Movement.
So Don, Chris, Carl, good to see you, three of you. Thank you for joining us. Let's start at the top. So you can't turn around without hearing about not just COVID, but the Delta variant. And it's, the dialogue we're hearing is almost not about the personal health crisis, but it's more about battle lines being drawn on personal rights issues. You're not going to make me wear a mask. I want to wear a mask, but you can't compel it. So Don, I'll start with you. Is that what this is about now?
Unfortunately, that's an accurate assessment, right? Is that we've entered an arena where the facts are secondary and our political ideology is at front and center, and our personal rights are being put in the front versus the greater good, right? And I don't really see it trending differently until we've experienced a little bit more pain, and that's unfortunate. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that does create partnership is acute pain that goes across party lines, that goes across socioeconomic. And we're seeing right now that people are experiencing some dire consequences by not taking the medical advice and such. I do have optimism that over the next few months, the tide of vaccinations will turn, the tide of the rhetoric will turn, because more and more people will experience that downside of not being smart.
Chris, I'm going to come back to you, give you a little bit of a break here on this one. But Carl, so the governor of South Carolina was one of the first out around this issue. And the governor on Fox News, as a matter of fact, Governor McMaster, was very careful about saying that we are not going to, that he wasn't going to default to that he was continue to give the residents of South Carolina the option to make the choice and wasn't going to compel it. The North Carolina is a little bit different, but how do you compare and contrast that in the Palmetto State?
Well, I think you're 100% right. The way that this is playing out, and unfortunately, the business community is stuck in the middle because we as a business community have got to be the middle ground between both political parties in this debate and say, look, what's best for our employees, what's best for our marketplace, because we can't afford another shutdown. I think we can all agree on that if we shut down again, we're in a world of hurt. And so it's up to us, whether that's companies incentivizing their employees to get the vaccine, whether it's mandating their employees to get the vaccine. This is going to play out in the next few weeks and months, I'm sure in courts. But what is paramount here is that the business community and the leadership in both North Carolina and South Carolina take control of this and say, look, here's what's best for us, for our company and our employees and our customers. And this is what we need to do to maintain a quality of life and a living for everybody.
Chris, does this end up, as Carl just talked about the economic effect of this, does this end up sending our economy sideways again?
I think that's really hard to know, right? I mean, I think the
Are you
danger.
worried that I'm sorry, are you worried that it might?
I think, look, where are we right now as a country, right? 50 some percent, 60 some percent are fully vaccinated. I think we're at 70% with at least one dose. I think the goal here is keep driving that higher and higher. I mean, the real economic risk comes if there's some future variant, and you're already seeing reports, right, this week about, I think, the Lambda variant, the Epsilon variant. I mean, each subsequent variant that comes, you just hope that the right conditions don't arise where it's a much more transmissible and much more lethal variant. I mean, I think that's when the game really changes, and that's when you're talking about some significant economic damage. Right now, even with the Delta variant, I think businesses have figured out how to navigate this, how to manage through it. It's not ideal by any stretch. I think it's why companies continue to encourage, if not require, employees to get vaccinated. That is, from all public health accounts, the best way as a society we can defend not only against the health risk, but the economic risk. So hopefully we don't have that really dire scenario somewhere, but that is the danger, right? The longer that this virus is out there, the greater the chance of additional mutations. And with those additional mutations, that's when you really start to have those worst case scenarios about the economic impacts. But it's not easy, right? I mean, I think it'll be really interesting to see when eventually the federal government grants full use authorization for the vaccines. I think that's when we're really going to start to see even more organizations and employers go ahead and say, you know what, it's worth mandating or requiring this of our employees, of our visitors, et cetera. It's hard for some of these companies to do that right now while it's under emergency use, but I think that's going to be the really telling moment. And it's not going to be 100% of companies, right? It's going to be some who say we don't want to do it, and others who say we think this is the best thing for our people, for our organization, and for our profitability.
So when you take that to the next step, compare and contrast how you all have just talked about this fear around whatever variant is coming out. But when you look at, and Don, Carl, please jump in on this. When you look at economic development, it's like the tale of two cities, the best at times and the worst at times. It's one of the best historic moments in economic development for the Carolinas. It's exceptional. So how do you square those two?
For me, most of the larger organizations have a multi-decade horizon. So even though there's short-term pain, right, they are looking to build their footprint in regions, and the Carolinas are beneficiary of this, that have the right growth trajectory, have the right educational footprint, have the right relationship between government and business. And so I think some of those fundamentals are what are keeping the Carolinas in the right space in terms of as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Carl?
I think Don's exactly right on this as well. I mean, we are absolutely going crazy in this region, in the Southeast, from home sales to new announcements, capital investment. I mean, who would have thought a year and a half ago that we would have had our best 2 years in capital investment in the Southeast during a pandemic? It's crazy. But I think people recognize the quality of life. Obviously, this work from home, remote workplace is going to be here for a little while. And so it's attracting more investment here. That's a good thing. And I think we need to make sure we just take advantage of it.
Chris, your day job is you're a premier economic developer for North Carolina for sure. And so what's driving this as it's just been described? Is it the low cost of money? Is it because it was pent up demand to begin with? Is it because of the great projects that you and your colleagues put forward? Is it because everyone's moving to the Sun Belt? How do you explain that this has been way outsized when it comes to numbers and historic amount of economic development?
Sure. I mean, I think the types of deals that North Carolina and South Carolina get the chance to compete for every day, they're usually driven by a couple factors. Sometimes it's just greater demand for a particular product, and that's why a manufacturer needs to find a new location. And then sometimes it's driven by dissatisfaction the company has wherever they're currently operating, and they decide to pick up and make that big move to somewhere else where they feel like it's a better environment for their company, for their employees, et cetera, et cetera. That explains why we get so many chances to compete. And as Carl said, it's been unprecedented in terms of just the sheer numbers of opportunities that at least here in North Carolina, and I suspect in South Carolina, the chances that we get to win that type of investment and job creation. As for why we win it, I couldn't agree more with what Donald said, which is our fundamentals pre-pandemic, post-pandemic continue to be really strong. I mean, that whether that's the fast-growing talent pool, whether that's the physical infrastructure and geographic location, the business climate and tax environment, all of those things are factors that companies will continue to look at when they make these decisions. I think North Carolina and I suspect South Carolina both really well positioned to come out on the other end of that process as successfully attracting those types of investments by companies.
Yeah, Don, what about the talent? Were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going, success breeds success. And so the year that Raleigh and the Triangle has had over the last 4 months, I mean, with Google and Apple, I can't see it slowing down anytime soon. So kudos to the Triangle for the success they've had. They're going to reap benefits for years.
Go ahead, Don.
No, I was going to describe, we were talking about the talent in our kind of our pre-discussion, which I think is really important narrative, because now we've got to feed the beast, so to speak, right? You start winning, right? And you get used to winning and there's that euphoria, but now how do you make sure that all of the stakeholders in the region continue to benefit from those wins? And that's where that talent crunch comes in, that competitiveness around the ability to secure, retain, right, that the talent that you bring in. And that's going to be a little bit more challenging, right, for the small and mid-sized businesses. So while we're really excited about the regional growth, there are some, I don't want to call it downsides, there's some things we have to prepare, right? And we have to educate folks about how to really tell the story and the narrative of their firm to really set themselves apart and be able to compete with the larger competitors that are coming to the market.
You know, Don, just on that, who is going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to chime in, but go ahead, Chris. Yeah, I can.
No. Finish your thought, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's what Don is describing is absolutely true. Earlier this week, I met with a great pharmaceutical products manufacturer here in the Triangle region. They've expanded a couple different times, 100 or so employees, but this was just on the heels of Amgen announcing a $500 million investment and 400 new jobs that they're creating, also in the Triangle. And this company, made a very clear point that they're concerned that some of their higher level talent is going to be attracted to or maybe poached away to work for the likes of an Amgen. So yes, success is great, but we always have to be mindful what the impacts are of recruiting new companies and what that does to some of the existing employers in this very fierce competition for talent.
So the gap on the talent gap has been widely reported, and we're talking about it now. But is there any concern? Do you have any lingering concerns, any of you, when it comes to we've had what some call a lost year of educational attainment in primary education, and now those seniors have moved in to become underclassmen, and so early in the pipeline, are we at all worried that the quality and the integrity of an education is going to be a problem when some of these kids, whether it's 2-year education, 4-year education, or just an apprenticeship type of program, is that going to show up in a lack of talent?
Well, but Chris, let me just jump in there. You're going to see a loss even in 2025, 2026 as birth rates declined during the Great Recession. And so you're going to see a fewer number of people graduate from high school in 2025, 2026. And so, yes, there is a shrinkage. So we're going to have to be smarter and more creative in how we entice young folks to get involved with manufacturing, high-tech jobs that are coming to this region. We have to be more proactive in how we approach that.
Don, are there creative ways to get this talent?
Yeah, one of the things that I like, right, and I'm smiling ear to ear, is that when there's a talent crunch, you have to remove some of the reliance on the typical pedigree to get a job done, which means our community college infrastructure is going to be more valued, right? The 2-year degree, the apprenticeships, the things that you really need to do the job versus the superficial things that you needed to get that warm and fuzzy feeling about who you hired, where they went to school. And I think that's great for our economy, because all of my kids, for example, have 4 kids, right? 2 of them 4-year education, 2 of them not. They're all doing things great in their lives that's for them. But there was a time where if you didn't have that typical 4-year pedigree, people could kind of thumb their nose at it a little bit. I think that's changing in a major way, and I think that's good. So a way to expand the talent pool is how do you get junior talent onboarded faster? How do you leverage the community college infrastructure? And how do you get better at tightly defining what those jobs are so that you can train to spec, right? Versus having all of this unnecessary experience that really doesn't equate to the job performance. So I see a lot of positive in those areas.
So Chris, go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to follow up. I think Don's point is interesting about how educational pedigree matters less when everyone is fighting for talent. I also think just based on some of the lessons we've learned during the pandemic about the efficacy of remote work, I think what that does is enables companies to source their talent from a much broader geographic base, because some of that talent, they no longer need to be working out of the same central office. They can have those remote workers, and that again feeds that diversity of talent pool for that employer, because now they're being able to hire folks from all over the country or all over whatever geography is that they look. And I think that's also another barrier that's been lowered when it comes to talent, because everyone is fighting for this very precious commodity of workforce.
So how meaningful, maybe better said, how meaningful, Amazon made an announcement recently that they weren't going to wait for apprenticeship training or 2-year education or even any type of before undergrad training, that they were just going to do it. And that's not a new idea, but it was again put forward as a progressive idea. So Carl, how many of those companies are we going to start to see them taking education in-house just to get the people that they need?
Well, it goes back to affordability. I mean, I think the bigger companies obviously can do that. The small business folks are going to continue to struggle in that area. They don't have the experiences and the capability of doing it in-house. So you're going to see a further divide, I think, between the small businesses and the large businesses. But for those that can, I think it's great. They're going to want to get the first pick of the litter, if you will. And so if Amazon can do that, they've proven time and time again that they can try new things and make it work. So I think it's a great opportunity, and it could be transformational.
Don, let's pivot to broadband access. It has been held out as being very important at the beginning of the pandemic. That's all we talked about was accessing broadband, getting more people plugged into the net. We need to do it. We need to do it now. There wasn't anyone that disagreed. Companies wanted to do it. There was money out there. But it seems like, I'm not going to be so dramatic to say it died on the vine, because it's still being debated and still being talked about and in some cases deployed. But it seems like it's kind of fizzled to some degree. And it seems like that would be an easy, maybe not inexpensive, but an easy win for both General Assemblies to put a stake in the ground and say, we finally finished the last mile. Everyone in every county has broadband access. Is there some concern? Are you hearing that this is not going to happen in a timely manner?
I'm personally not. It's just a function of the when we get to that end state, right? Because that's something like, are you for the military? Yes. Right. Nobody wins an election saying they're not for the military. Right. Like, so it doesn't matter your affiliation. That's similar to broadband. So I think what is occurring is the sausage being made of how to do it and the when, right? That we as community leaders need to help continue to put pressure and accelerate. But I'm not seeing anything that's discouraging to me. It's just kind of caught up in that time crunch, because that is a way to create social equity, right, with rural communities. And North Carolina and South Carolina are still rural states, right? And so a lot of the leadership are in these rural communities. So I think there'll be some momentum there over the short term.
Chris, do you see it differently, or you see it the same? How do you come down on it?
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well. Again, like I just said, those geographic barriers to sourcing talent have gotten much lower now because of what we've all learned about the capabilities of remote work during the pandemic. But I'm encouraged by things like, here in North Carolina, Governor Cooper unveiled a plan a few weeks ago. It's $1.2 billion focused on broadband expansion. Yes, part of it is extending the cables, but it's not just about extending the fiber to where it needs to be, right? You've also got hardware considerations that the end users have to have. So there's part of that pot of money is going towards funding some of those hardware purchases to enable people to tap into that expanded fiber. And then, of course, probably most important is digital literacy, right? I mean, we're asking people who have never had high-speed internet or may not even have a computer in their homes to all of a sudden be able to navigate having this great piece of infrastructure. Well, we can't assume that's just going to automatically happen. So I think the plan smartly invests in some education and digital literacy awareness efforts that are going to help increase adoption of broadband in these areas that have not had it before. And I think you need all three of those prongs for this to be as successful as it can be. And I think that's why that 1.2 billion is focused on all three of those strategies.
Carl, even before we had ever heard the term the novel coronavirus, had no idea what pandemic mean other than maybe a sci-fi movie, was the idea that chambers of commerce in general were losing some members broadly, not all, but broadly losing members, broadly losing momentum, broadly losing interest. And I know this is casting a fairly wide net, but now, given COVID, we've seen that accelerate. Is that a worry? First of all, as a chamber exec, is that a worry for you? But maybe even more importantly, what does it say? What does it spell for what has been a traditional business booster organization?
Well, like everything, there's a shelf life, and I think the chambers are a critical point right now across the country, across the world. I mean, you think of it, I mean, for a long time, chambers still exist in the 1960s, 1970s model in the 21st century. And so you have to adapt, you have to be more creative, but really as a membership organization, you have to be responsive to your members. And that climate has changed. There's been a lot of stale years for chambers, but there are a lot of progressive chambers right now. They're doing extremely well. Really impressed with Adrienne in Raleigh and what she's been able to do. Indianapolis, Charlotte went through a change a couple of years ago. They're coming out of that stronger. I mean, there are some great opportunities for chambers in any membership organization in times of crisis. And this is to think proactively, forget what you've done in the past, but really think of what opportunities are out there. But I'm very bullish on chambers in overall, if you can think differently and be creative in how you represent your membership.
We've got a few minutes left. Donald, I want to at least unpack the idea of as Congress closes in on this debate around evictions, and they've extended now, federal deadline for evictions, personal evictions has been extended to October 4th. But you can't talk about that without talking about housing, about affordable housing, about the explosive cost and growth of real estate. So this stew of primary housing, is it a good thing or a bad thing that's going on?
Oh man, it really depends on where you sit on the socioeconomic scale, right? If you have the ability to sell your home and buy up and take advantage of what's occurring, it's a great market, right? If you are a renter and can't pay your bills and you're accumulating that back debt, if you will, and don't understand the different programs available to help you, right? If you're a landlord but you've mortgaged these properties. So really, to me, it's a tough spot. And I'll be really specific. Let's say you own 10 properties, you have 5 of them that you have mortgages on, and you haven't been able to evict people that don't pay rent for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, a year. There's a double whammy there that people aren't seeing. So the short answer is that's a real complex topic because it's really situational. And there are some winners, but it's the same folks that are already winning. The folks at the middle or at the bottom are experiencing pain around this real estate piece. Affordable housing is tougher to come by.
Did we lose you there, Donald? We'll let you reset. All right. Well, Chris, let me go to you this side. We got a couple minutes left. Is this, in economic development terms, is this a problem child? This housing cost?
It's certainly, housing has definitely become much more of one of these issues that economic developers have had to think about in recent years, especially in some of these higher growth areas where that lack of housing, and typically I think we would call it workforce housing. Affordable housing has a pretty specific connotation, but workforce housing, the lack of good choices or prohibitively expensive housing, I mean, those things ultimately constrain the workforce. They constrain the attractiveness of that place for people to move to if they're being recruited for a job. I mean, housing is inextricably tied up with the whole workforce challenge that we are continuing to see employers struggle with all over the country. So if you don't solve housing and housing affordability, at some point, you're going to see those negative effects on those employers that are trying to fill positions either by local hires or by recruiting hires from outside the market. And I think that's exactly why we've seen it surface as such a major issue for economic development professionals in these past few years.
We've got less than a minute left. Donald, technology kind of cut you off and didn't give you a chance to put a period on that sentence. Was there anything you wanted to wrap up with?
No, I really would just echo what Chris was describing. It's a multi-pronged issue, but it needs to be at the forefront with creative solutions, right? It can't be left to its own kind of market drivers, right? We've got to get in there and make sure all the different constituencies have a seat at the table on that one.
Yeah. Okay. Carl, last word. Will it supercharge, in 10 seconds, will it supercharge affordable housing debate and initiatives? Will we see more of that?
I think we will. These are all products. These are growing pains we've got to deal with in the Carolinas, and it's going to be tough, but it's a good thing in the end.
Yeah, I was going to say good problems to have. Gentlemen, thank you, as always, for joining us and through some of the technology challenges. Good to see you all. Happy almost fall. Happy weekend. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.